Today I'm going to show you how to make a loop and a wrap loop using wire or headpins and pliers. You can see here that a loop does a great job of making a nice neat finish to hang your beaded earrings, charms, to make charm bracelets, any kind of little drop that you can think of in jewellery making. That's what you're going to use a loop for. But if you use a wrapped loop, it not only looks neater and prettier, adds a little bit of a design element, but it keeps your charm loops secure. It means they can't pull out from a jump ring or become unattached in any way. So it's really important to use these when you're making charm bracelets and things that are going to get a bit more wear. And you can see there you've got a couple of wraps there that hold that bead in place, but also add a bit of a design element as well. So to make a wrap loop, you're going to need a head pin, your beads, and 3 pairs of pliers. You're going to use chain nose or flat nose pliers, round nose pliers, and some flush cutters. I always think it's worth practicing on some wire until you've got the hang of it. Wire is a little bit softer because it's not been work hardened like a head pin is. So you can see it's much softer, so when you're practicing it's a bit easier to use. So using your round nose pliers, you're going to grip that wire about 1/3 of the way down your pliers and about 2 centimetres or 1 inch from the end. You're going to grip that plier nice and tightly with your fingers and bend the pliers away from you, just to about 45 degrees, so you've got a sort of shoulder shape, if you can picture your shoulder. Gripping tightly with those pliers, you're going to bring the piece of wire over the top towards you, all the way down until it's parallel. You're going to loosen the grip on the pliers, swivel them till that jaw's sat back on top, keeping it nice and secure in. Don't take them out or lose that place, and make sure that your pliers are still sat snugly in that loop. Then you're going to take this little piece of wire underneath and away from you until you've got a nice right angle. Then you can take your pliers out, and what you're looking for is a little loop on the top of your wire that looks like a balloon. It's sitting right on the top like a head, and then you've got this piece of wire coming out. So if you were to just make a regular loop, you'd want to trim that piece of wire off. So you're going to take your cutters and place them inside the loop, but it's this piece of wire that you're cutting, but you're cutting it from inside that loop so that you end up with a nice flush finish. So this often freaks my students out a bit because they feel like they're going to be cutting the whole loop off, but you're not. As long as you've positioned those correctly, and I've got the flat side of my flush cutters against this stem, but it's this piece of wire that I'm trimming. Give those pliers a good squeeze. Hold on to the little piece, because otherwise you'll be pinging that across the room at your partner and they won't be very happy. And especially if you sat on the sofa watching TV together. So you can see here you've got a nice little loop. Mine's got an ever so slight opening, so what you can do is just take your flat or your chain nose pliers and just give that a little squeeze shut. And there you go, you've got a beautiful loop. So what does that look like with a bead in place? Let me show you. So you're going to take your head pin and pop your little bead on, and you want these loops to sit about 2 millimeters above the top of your bead. And it's also important to remember that where you position your wire on your pliers is how it depends on the size of the loop that your loop's going to end up. So the more towards the narrow end of the pliers, the smaller your loop's going to be. So you may want to adjust that if you're making if you're working with large beads or large chain links. You may want to make them bigger or smaller. So I'm working about 2 to 3 millimeters above that bead. I'm gripping my pliers and the wire. Now I'm going to hold on to that bead and bend my pliers all the way away from me until I've got that little angle. I'm going to bring that plier over the top all the way down towards me until it's as parallel as I can get it. Obviously the bead's now in the way, so you're not going to be able to get it all the way down. Loosen that grip on the jaws, swivel those pliers till they're back in place. Grip tightly and take this piece of wire underneath and away from you, and you'll feel that with the head pin it's slightly more difficult to do. And then you can take your pliers out. We're going to use the cutters again to trim off that excess. Remember to put the flush side of the cutters against the area that you're cutting to get as neat a finish as possible. And there you have it. So that would be a lovely little earring or a charm for a necklace. Now I'm going to show you how to use a wrap loop, and that would be for something like this, where you want that decorative piece a wire wrap here. That's also going to add security and stop any of your charms falling off. If they get snagged in a scarf or they just get caught in fabric, it keeps them nice and secure. So to do that, we're going to practice with some wire again. This time you want to make sure you leave yourself a decent length of wire to work with, especially when you're practicing. I would say to begin with at least 1 inch. So you're going to grip that pliers in the same way as before, hold on to that wire, bend it away from you, bring that wire all the way over the top until it's parallel. Loosen that grip and take the wire away from you underneath to a right angle. You're gonna now I always like to get my chain nose pliers and grip across the top of that loop. And you can either do this with your fingers or with a second pair of pliers. I'll show you with my fingers first of all. And you're just gonna push that piece of wire underneath, keeping, you can see how my finger is nice and close behind that stem. I'm really just pushing that round to create these nice neat wraps. And you'll find that practice makes perfect. Your first couple might not be as neat as that, but you're aiming for nice wraps that sit right next to each other. And you can do as many as you need, but 2 or 3 is usually sufficient. So that's what it's going to look like. And now I'm going to show you how that works on a head pin. With a bead in place, it changes things slightly. If you're working with a head pin that's just a 2 inch or a 2.5 inch head pin, I would aim not to fill your head pin any more than halfway, because you need to have plenty of room to make that loop. I'm just going to pop this one little bead in, and again you're going about 2 to 3 millimeters above that bead. You're gripping the bead and you're bending the pliers away from you to a 45 degree, bringing that piece of wire over the top and towards you. Then loosen the grip on the pliers, take them to the top, make sure they're still secure, take that little piece of head pin underneath and away to a right angle. Now instead of trimming, we're going to grip the top of the loop. Now I find these head pins are actually quite soft, but generally with quality head pins that are very hardened, I find with my weak little fingers, I get a much better grip if I use a pair of pliers. So what I'm going to do is just grip the end of that wire, and I'm dragging it behind me. And when I run out of room to manoeuvre, I take it out, I turn that loop over, and then take it all the way round. And you can see I've got a bit more space now. And what you're going to do is you're going to keep wrapping, making those loops nice and close to each other until you meet the bead. Like that. And once you haven't got any more space to add any more loops, you're going to take your flush cutters, using the flat edge again, get them as close as you can to that end, give that a snip. And then if you've got a little snaggy bit, what you can do is just use your chain nose pliers to just fold that in. So there's your beautiful loop, and that's a good way to practice. If, however, you're going to be working with a piece of jewellery, what you want to make sure you do is attach your loop before you finish it. So I'll show you how that looks. So I'm going to just borrow this bead again. So you're going to add your bead on as before. You're going to make your loop. And then what you need to do is attach it to your charm bracelet or whatever it is you're working on. I just slide it through to where I want to attach it and just hook it in until it pings, and you can see that that hook's now attached, a little loop. And then you're going to make your wrap loop as before. So what I do is I hold it this way up so that all the jewellery and the other pieces are out of the way, they drop down and gravity helps you. Remember gripping this piece here across the wire, and always use flat nose pliers or chain nose pliers for gripping. If you use round nose, you'll end up with little notches or little marks on your wire from the round nose pliers. And I'm just wrapping that round in the same way as before, stopping to readjust it. Like that, and just keep going. until you can't fit any more loops in, just like that. And then you trim it as you did before. So there you go. That's how you make loops and wrap loops to complete all your jewellery making. Don't forget to follow my YouTube channel for more great videos and tips and techniques. Happy beading!